Oh, wow.
Elizabeth, there you are.
Adriana, I have discovered the most amazing thing, a Ming vase.
What now?
An incredibly rare and valuable Ming vase. It's a steal at only $3. $3.
Is it now? Just like that Picasso you found that sold for millions?
That might have been just a doodle. You never know what you get with these yard sales. It looks like an original to me. There's writing on the bottom, you read it, oh, top to bottom, or maybe it's bottom to top, I can't remember. You know, I can imagine the emperor, he probably carried this around with him.
Yes, Elizabeth, the emperor carried a yard sale find with him everywhere.
An original yard sale find. There's Chinese writing on the bottom.
Wait, you speak Chinese?
Oh no, but I get the gist of it. And look at all these details.
Oh, let me see. Oh no.
You better hope that wasn't a Ming vase.
Maybe it will sell more as a puzzle. Hi, welcome to Art Adventures. I'm Adriana Eftimie.
And I'm Elizabeth Whelan, and today we're talking about art forgery.
Look at this beautiful painting here. It looks like an original Vermeer. Or is it? What exactly is an art forgery, and when does a copy become a forgery?
Oh, that's a really good question. It can be so confusing. So, an art forgery is when someone creates an artwork with the intent to pass it off as the work of another artist, for financial gain or to perpetuate a fraud. It's perfectly fine to try copying another artist's work so that you can learn from their process or pay homage to an artist you admire. And you may have seen artists set up with their easels in museums, trying to copy, master copies is what they're called. And they're trying to figure out a famous artist technique or just sort of see if they can pull something like that off. There's nothing at all wrong with that, but it's not the same as forgery. Forging a work of art is considered a serious crime. So, Adriana, has anyone ever asked you to forge an artwork?
Elizabeth? No, I haven't been asked yet, but I did copy many paintings from famous artists just to learn more about their style, their brushstrokes, but I haven't been asked to forge one yet, so we'll see.
Well,
I'll keep you posted. Forgers usually operate independently. They are the artists who create the fake artworks and then they try to sell them to collectors or dealers. It's not common for artists to be approached or commissioned to commit forgery. In unique cases, art collectors or dealers discover a forgery and decide to work with the forger to create more paintings in order to make a profit. But it's more like teamwork, not commission. This happens rarely because art collectors and dealers usually aim to acquire and sell authentic artwork, given that their career relies on their expertise, credibility, and reputation. The question is, why do forgers forge?
Well, I guess from an artist's point of view, maybe it's a desire to show how skilled and clever they are by tricking people. They're con artists, but I would say maybe financial gain. So a famous work of art can sell for millions of dollars. If you can forge a copy, maybe you have a chance of getting some money as well. Or personal vendettas. In some cases, forgers create fake artworks as a form of revenge or spite. Perhaps they'd like to feel clever to fool a museum or a collector, for instance, or get back at them for some reason or for some personal slight. And I wonder too if insecurity plays a role. An artist is afraid perhaps that maybe their own original work isn't good enough, so they hide behind the work of others. And again, forgery isn't the same as paying tribute to another artist by creating master copies that look super accurate. A forger is actually pretending that their work was created by that famous artist. It's a very different thing. So, and Adriana, you were telling me about some methods that artists use to forge paintings.
Yes, it actually takes a lot of skill to forge paintings. And here's a few ways forgers do it. They do it either by copying, they're replicating an existing artwork by imitating the style and technique used by the original artist, using similar materials, canvas and paint that were typically of the same time period, and even made the artwork look older and more convincing by various techniques like staining, cracking, keeping it under ultraviolet light to oxidize. Or they can alter an existing artwork. Some forgers take existing paintings done by someone else in the same time period, found in thrift stores, for example, and alter them to mimic the artwork of a renowned artist by adding or removing elements, making modifications to the style, composition, and colors, and even changing the signature, of course.
Right, right.
Another way is painting in the same style to make it look as if a previously unknown work by the renowned artist has been discovered. And let's not forget about creating fake provenance. Provenance contains the authentication documents, ownership history, sales record, exhibition history, the trail of documents used to identify the artwork. Elizabeth, which famous forger are we looking at today?
Well, let's talk about a dramatic art forgery case involving the work of this artist, Johannes Vermeer. Now, this actually is one of his paintings, and he definitely had a really distinctive and very detailed, realistic style. So I'll tell you a little bit about the forger, and then we'll look at some of Vermeer's paintings and the fakes and see what you think. So the forger in question was a guy named Han van Meegeren. He was a Dutch artist who became famous in the 1930s and 40s for creating forgeries of works by a bunch of famous artists, such as Johannes Vermeer. Van Meegeren's forgeries were so convincing that they fooled many experts and collectors, and he made millions of dollars selling them. So this is in the 1930s and 40s, and that's a ton of money. However, Van Meegeren's downfall came when one of his forgeries was purchased by a prominent Nazi leader during World War II. So that definitely was a problem. And after the war, Van Meegeren was arrested for collaborating with the Nazis, and he faced the death penalty for this.
Oh, wow.
So that was pretty serious. And to avoid execution, he confessed to creating the forgery and revealed that he had actually been working secretly for the Dutch resistance, using the forgeries as a way to raise money for them. So Van Meegeren's story became an international sensation. He was eventually convicted of forgery, but was spared the death penalty and instead sentenced to 1 year in prison.
That's it?
That's it. But now let's look at the artwork. So first, we have some paintings I want to show you by Johannes Vermeer. These are originals in chronological order of when he painted them. So here's an early work by Vermeer, and if you have seen his work before, you can see, well, he hasn't quite hit his groove yet. The figures are a little flat, but the basics are the colors that he liked and the compositions and the wonderful light, the great depth to the scene and such. They're there in these paintings. They're really great paintings. And then here are a couple of Vermeer's later paintings, and you might be more familiar with these. They're, most people recognize these kinds of scenes that he did. These are some of the most famous work. And you can see the detail, the luminosity, the gorgeous light. And Johannes Vermeer really matured as an artist by the time he had painted these. So now you're probably expecting great things from the forger Van Meegeren. After all, he made millions making fake Vermeers, and he fooled so many, which was why I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw these. This first one here of a woman playing the cittern has some of the look and feel of Vermeer, the light, it kind of the same type of woman he would paint, the blue dress. But subsequent paintings, I think Van Meegeren got lazy. People believed these were Vermeer paintings, and he just churned them out. They seem really amateurish.
I think he was lazy all the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it certainly wasn't his own work. You can see that the tie-in is there to some of Vermeer's earlier work. It could have been possible at a very long stretch that Vermeer painted these. And this is what you were saying. Sometimes an artist will create work that never existed and say, oh, look, we've just discovered, this never before seen Vermeer. So this is the one, Adriana, that always gets me.
I know, Elizabeth.
So, in my opinion, this painting bears no resemblance at all to a Vermeer. It lacks depth, It's just awful. What is up with that elbow in the yellow sleeve? It seems like there's no arm there. So, I mean, this just really gets on my nerves. But what do you think about this, Adriana?
Well, Elizabeth, I'm with you. Vermeer really seems to like his arm fuller than Van Meegeren. I am really wondering how he got away, with so many forgeries, because his style is obviously so different than Vermeer's. But we have to think this was back in the day, and maybe there weren't as many art experts back then, right? So it was a little bit easier for him. If he was to paint those forgeries nowadays, I think he wouldn't get very far.
Well, yeah, this is actually true, because you'd have more people. You'd have the collective public analyzing, whereas then you might have pulled in one or two people to have a look at it. But I also think that there's a collective desire. Sometimes people want to fool themselves. At this particular point in the war, it was really important to the Dutch that they have more, cultural artifacts to feel pride about, considering what was going on in the country. And so when these, paintings suddenly appeared, perhaps there was just a desire to sort of fool themselves. And I'd like to ask our audience, would you have been fooled? Because it's really interesting to look at some of this stuff. Just because an expert said back in the day that it was by Vermeer, a lot of people just went along with it. And we're encouraging everybody to have their own opinions about artwork.
Yes, and sometimes you have an artist that is well established and they still have a variety of styles.
Exactly.
But with Vermeer, he doesn't have as many paintings surviving. So how can you be fooled knowing that he has this very unique style?
Right, exactly. Yeah, so that I just think that's an amazing case. And okay, so let's think of another famous forger. Adriana?
I have another one.
Okay.
He's a German forger. His name is Wolfgang Beltracchi. He and his wife operated an elaborate art forgery scheme for almost 40 years.
Wow.
Yeah, they are the Bonnie and Clyde of the art world.
Sounds like it.
His uniqueness is that Beltracchi was very flexible in his approach, being able to forge paintings in many styles of many famous painters. But he didn't just copy an existing and well-known painting. He created new ones in the style of the artist in question, meticulously studying and immersing himself in that artist's world. These new fake paintings would be presented as long-lost treasures of the famous artist's body of work.
Exactly.
He sold fake paintings to collectors for millions of dollars until he got caught because he accidentally used the modern titanium white that didn't exist in that period of time.
Oh, clever, right.
Not as clever as he thought he was. I guess he became very comfortable in his approach. He was like, no one's going to catch me.
Yeah. So all of this made me wonder, which artist's work has been forged the most, to the best of our knowledge?
One of the most famous artists who had their work forged countless times is the Dutch artist Vincent van Gogh. He had quite a shocking starving artist story, suffering from severe depression, cutting off his ear, painting an enormous number of artworks in very short time.
Wow.
But he only sold one painting in his lifetime, which is very depressing. Eventually, he committed suicide, and after his death, he became famous and his paintings very expensive. So who doesn't love Van Gogh's paintings, right? Well, even forgers do, for quite a few reasons. First of all, Van Gogh's works are highly prized by collectors and command very high prices at auctions. His most expensive painting sold for $117 million in 2022.
Oh my goodness.
One painting worth $117 million. That's I wish Van Gogh knew about this.
Right, I know. That would be incredible.
On the other hand, his distinctive style with bold brushstrokes, thick application of paint, unique use of color, and the fact that he worked in series, recreating similar paintings all over again, made him the perfect target for forgers.
Oh, I see.
Let's look at these three portraits of Van Gogh. You can clearly see those brilliant brushstrokes and use of color that have been forged so many times. Van Gogh painted many variations of the same subject, each of them slightly different. Now, guess how many self-portraits Van Gogh painted?
How many?
36.
Wow.
So a forger might think, oh, what's one more?
Right.
Let's just add one more long lost painting. So Elizabeth, what do you think of Van Gogh's work? Have you done any self-portraits?
Well, I haven't painted any self-portraits, and I really admire the fact that Van Gogh could do it 36 times. That's a lot of, self-analysis. But I have to tell you, years ago in high school, we had an art history class, and people raved about Van Gogh. And of course, maybe because I was a teenager, I'm like, well, I don't like Van Gogh. And of course, we weren't looking at pictures on the internet at that time. These are just reproductions in books, and they weren't all that impressive. So I decided, I don't like Van Gogh. But when I finally saw his work in a museum, it completely changed my mind. The brilliance of the color, the texture of the brush strokes, just the complexity of the way he kind of builds the whole thing up. I could go on and on.
Exactly.
And that made all the difference. It's one of the reasons I like to encourage people to actually see the paintings in museums. You can't get a sense of scale and all the rest of it until you do. But I also see why he would be a target for forgers. It would seem easy to try to slip another one in because there are so many paintings of his out there.
Exactly. I do agree with you. The first I saw Van Gogh's paintings, it was, online on my phone. And I was like, oh, Van Gogh, okay, I can see something, but not really. And then I went to the museum and I was like, oh, wow, his brushstrokes, the brilliance, as you said, and he has this, it seems like he painted in an easily manner, but his paintings are so complex. They are so well thought out, the composition, everything.
Exactly.
And I did copy a few of his paintings quite a few times, and I got inspired to make my own self-portraits.
Oh, very
Not
good.
very good.
But isn't it interesting? It's not as easy to do a master copy of Van Gogh's work as it looks like. If you're really trying to follow his strokes and that kind of thing, it's really quite interesting how he did it.
Yes, but I did enjoy it, and I got quite a few pointers on how to apply paint to my future paintings.
Right, and that's why master copies have always been done. The benefit artists get from them. It's just a slippery slope from that to actually forging.
Yeah. Let's not forget British artist John Myatt, another artist who created lots of forgeries in the 1980s and 1990s. He had a real talent for working in the style of other artists. His work went to collectors around the world via an unscrupulous dealer who sold Myatt's fakes for far more than Myatt was paid.
That's not fair.
Nope. Not fair to him. But John Myatt is having the last laugh. He's now selling his paintings and prints of his tributes to Van Gogh and other artists as genuine fakes.
Oh, that's great.
It's not at all illegal to sell copies as long as you are clear about who painted them. The subtle differences.
That reminds me of Mark Landis. So he may be the most famous art forger who never committed a crime. So Landis is also a living artist, and over about 30 years, he approached dozens of museums and university galleries in multiple states, claiming to be a wealthy philanthropist with a collection he wished to donate. He went to great lengths to perpetuate this fantasy to give away his fakes, not only falsifying documents and using aliases, but also dressing in costume. Since Landis was donating his copies to museums, he wasn't really doing anything illegal, but he did fool a lot of people who weren't that happy when they discovered the truth. So fortunately, he has now turned to creating his own works of art, and just like John Myatt, painting works in tribute and in the open. So how are forgeries finally uncovered?
It can be very difficult to conclusively prove whether a painting is a forgery or not, but here are three ways they do it. Expert opinion by comparison. There are experts who studied an artist's work extensively, and they may be able to tell when something is suspicious. They're usually looking for inconsistencies or differences in style, composition, and technique. Examine the provenance, history of ownership of the painting. That's another way to discover if it's a forgery or not.
Right.
To look for any gaps or discrepancies that could indicate a forgery. Even with all of these techniques, sometimes experts can be fooled. This is the reason there is still a high percentage of forgeries in the art market, in museums, institutions, and private collections.
Do you think art forgery is still happening?
Oh, yes. Considering the contemporary art, it's a little bit easier to forge than the old masters where they had, weeks, months, years of working on a painting. I would say yes. So Elizabeth, what would you do if you discovered you have a forgery in your collection?
Oh gosh, that's a really good question. I mean, you think, well, should I call the police, right? But maybe you don't want people to know that you have a forgery. You know, if you paid a lot of money for that painting, you might be going, maybe I should call my art dealer and try to pass this off to someone else. Now that is also illegal.
Is that what you would do?
No, I'm not. I'm just. Yeah, I don't have any forgeries. I'm just brainstorming. You know, but I think. I think the first thing that I would do if I thought I had a forgery is I'd probably call a museum or a conservator and say, hey, I need a second opinion about this. Because you don't really want all of these fakes going around.
Exactly.
It's very difficult to know how many forgeries actually have made it all the way to museums, for example. Every now and again we hear stories about expensive paintings being discovered. So it's interesting trying to work that out.
Allegedly, there are about 40% of the paintings in museums and institutions that are forgeries. So that's a very high percentage.
Yeah. And also, I mean, you might actually like the painting. Even if you had paid a lot for it, or even if you had inherited from somebody else or someone had given it to you, you may not actually want to part with it. This is why people do buy things like they'll buy a copy, they'll ask an artist or get a copy of Monet's Water Lilies, not because they actually need a Monet painting. They're happy for it to be a copy, even if they're not necessarily telling everybody. Well, but they've got this painting.
Exactly, but it really depends if you're an art collector or an art investor. Because if you're an investor and you just bought $1 million painting, that's a forgery.
Yeah, this is really true.
Yes.
You know, whether you're just enjoying it, whether you've inherited it and you're just going to pass it on to your children, or whether you were planning to actually make some money. Because in the current market, wouldn't you say that people are a little bit careful? They are actually hiring the experts when they buy and sell.
Yes, they do actually. The art investors, the art collectors, probably not as much, because if they want something, they like something, they will buy it just to have them in their living room and enjoy it. But I do have one more question for you. Has anyone ever forged one of your paintings?
Oh, you know, that's a really good question.
Or copied them?
Well, they may have copied them. I'm not quite sure. You know, what's one of the things you never really know if somebody has or not. It's really interesting.
Someone actually copied a painting of mine, I think about 2 years ago, and they sent me a picture of it.
Oh, that's really cute.
And it was very cute, and I was like, oh, wow, okay.
Now, I have had someone take some of my artwork and color on it.
Oh, that works too.
Someone bought a black and white print and then added, kind of like with magic marker, filled it in.
Oh, that's
and
really cool.
likewise showed it to me. I was like, oh, I hadn't quite intended that,
like
but
a
it looks
coloring
great.
book.
Right, exactly. So you just never know. But intentional forgery, I think that's something, you know, quite different.
Yeah, maybe we'll discover in a few years if someone actually forged your paintings or not.
So I hope that this has given you some information about, you know, what the difference is between forgery and just making master copies. And when you read stories about forgeries and that sort of thing, you know a little bit more about how some of this stuff is done. Well, so it's great to know there are so many tools to uncover forgeries. And if you're an artist out there and you've been making master copies and you're thinking, maybe I could try my hand at forgery, I say, don't do it.
And for more information about today's show, check out our website, artadventures-tv.com, where you can find paintings from today, book and movie recommendations, and so much more.
Oh, and Adriana, I wanted to tell you, I found it out that my Ming vase is unfortunately just a lovely vase. It is not actually.
And it survived the crash. It's a miracle.
Exactly. So join us next week, because we're going to be talking about, what are we talking about next week?
Elizabeth, we're talking about art theft.
Oh, that's right, theft. Another way to grow your art collection.
Woohoo!
Join us then.
See you
later.
next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Put it here in the thing.
Let me double check the shot list.
How are we going to do that?
You need a third person.
Is that what it says?
Actually, I said a whole bunch of stuff I wasn't